Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm an employment advisor in Halifax, and I'm here with my colleague Felicia. And today we're going to be talking about interviews, just in the realms of looking for work, getting a job, and getting to that stage. So we're going to give you some hints and tips about how to get through an interview. Felicia, interviews, the dreaded interview. Most people are nervous, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I always try and put people at ease by saying, if you're not nervous when you're going for your interview, how interested are you in that job?
Yeah.
I think it's natural to be nervous if the interview means something to you. So a certain level of nerves is good, but it's to try and make that nerve to not become overwhelming, because then you're not likely to give your best performance. And also remembering that the interviewer is probably under almost equal pressure as you, because they have to get the right person for the role. So trying to see them on a level to yourself would hopefully put you at ease a little bit.
You know, it's funny with interviews because I feel that I'm quite a confident person, but when it comes to interviews, I absolutely go to pieces, and I totally get it, you know, when people are nervous for them. And you're absolutely right about the employer thing, because I'm in a position where I actually interview people as well, and I'm just as nervous, you know, sort of in that role. So I suppose, you know, one of the things to say to people is do remember that, you know, it's a conversation. You're both people on an equal level and you're having a conversation. You know, try not to sort of put yourself in a position where you feel like you're beneath that person just because you're the interviewee.
And to do what you can to make, I think, things to put yourself more at ease is knowing that you're prepared. So it's kind of one of the biggest things for me. I think no matter how confident you are and how good you think you're at interviews, every interview is different, and you need to prepare for every interview as if it's the first interview and not rely on the fact that the last one went well, therefore this one will go well. So always kind of do your preparations on every aspect, which I'm sure we'll go through, but those little things will help you to feel more confident when you actually get there.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you've said that, because I'd probably have missed that part, but is it the 5 P's, isn't it? Proper preparation prevents poor performance. But yeah, it's absolutely right. And you can put that in anything in life, but for interviews especially, you know, you must prepare. What I would say with interviews is that the first thing is your interview starts as soon as you leave the house. So, you know, things like making sure that you're preparing your journey. Are you going to be there on time? Do you need to get there a little bit early, but not too early?
What do you say is too early? I always say no more. You might get there an hour early depending on your bus, but not to go in more than 10 minutes. 10 to 15. Find a coffee shop if you need to, if it's a nice day, sit outside. Do a little bit of extra prep or just clear your head, but definitely. Because if you go too early, I think sometimes it can frustrate the employer, because then it also shows bad timing on your part. So it's not a good thing. I've had people say, well, if I'm really early, then it just makes me look better. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And it actually throws that employer off there, because they're probably interviewing other people that day and they've got a schedule. So it might throw them out of that schedule a little bit. So yeah, absolutely. You know, if you're going to be early and you want to be in the vicinity, you know, but don't go into the employer till about 10 minutes. Before your interview time. One of the tips I always give people as well is that, you know, if you're nervous and you're a smoker, don't be smoking before you go in, you know, outside the company gate, you know, sort of having a quick cigarette. 2 things there, you might get seen, but also the smell, you know, when you walk in, you know, it's not a good impression as a first impression. Unfortunately, although cigarettes, you know, if you are a smoker, make you feel a bit calmer, in this situation, it's a no-go, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's so good tip is if you are a smoker, it is very likely. So we're not saying don't, because it's very likely that that's what you're going to do, because that's going to help settle your nerves. But definitely minimum of 10 minutes before. And don't go, some people think, I'll just have a smoke and then spray, but then you have the smoke smell with the spray on top, and then you might throw a chewing gum in and forget to take it out, and all those don't help with the first impression either. So kind of 15 minutes before if you must, because it's likely that you are going to, but definitely not any closer towards going into.
I feel a bit nervous you saying all that now. I'm like, oh.
And the thing you mentioned about journeys, so I think a lot of my earlier interviews I was on the bus, and you would do your natural things, you prepare your journey, you know what bus you need to go on, you know kind of what time it's going to get you there, and hopefully do a dummy run. If you've got time, always do a dummy run, because if you look online, you'll see the bus and you'll see what time it's supposed to get you there, and you get there, but you don't know which way to walk to get to where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
So at least if you do that dummy run a day before, then you know exactly where you're walking, you're putting yourself under less pressure.
Yeah, really good tip.
Another tip, because this has caught me out in an interview, have change if you're going on the bus. So I was going for an interview and I had money, but the driver didn't have change and I couldn't get on the bus, which means I had to get the next bus, and then I was late for the interview. So even little things like making sure that you've got the correct change to get on the bus does help as well, just in case. Yeah,
and it helps to alleviate those nerves as well, being prepared, doesn't it? Because you feel prepared, therefore you don't feel as nervous. So it's really, really important. In terms of the dummy run, you know, one of the things that you can use with that these days is Google Street View again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I love Street View because I'm nosy, but I think it's really good to use practically to be able to sort of, you know, have a look at the street. As you say, you know, where do I go when I get off the bus? Oh, there's the bus stop and I'll walk up here and there's the company.
Yeah.
So you can use Street View as well to do that, as particularly at the minute, obviously with the pandemic, if you don't want to get out and about too much, you know, and go on the bus too much as well. So it's a really good tip to do the dummy run thing, definitely. So obviously we've got clothing. You know, I'm trying to think of interview tips here because it's things that we kind of assume, but, you know, if you've never had an interview before, it's like what to wear. And I think some people actually think, and we might have differing opinions on this, because I would always say for whatever the interview is, that you dress up. You know, that you put on at least a shirt and tie and trousers, a suit if you've got one. For women, obviously, stick to, you know, suit jacket and skirt or trousers or whatever. A lot of people I come across, they think that if they're going for sort of a manual role, you know, like a factory role or something like that, that it doesn't matter. But I think it really does matter, because I think the interview is your moment to show that you care and that you've thought about it and you're giving that first impression. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I agree with you should always make an effort. And that effort, I think that can vary depending on the job that you're going for. So I think you don't always have to wear a jacket and a shirt, but a nice blouse or a nice jumper. And you don't have to do the black and white. So it used to be, I've got to wear a black skirt and a white shirt. I think it's nice to inject a little bit of personality sometimes. So it's nice to have a little bit of colour. But always just making sure that you come across professional, because you know, it is that first impression that it will always stick in somebody's head. I mean,
no nose for definite, no jeans,
no trainers, no overpowering jewellery. No overpowering perfume as well. It's nice to smell good, but you may be in a small enclosed room with that employer, and you know, if you've got too much on, it might choke.
They might not like your perfume.
They might not like it. It might be too overbearing. Not too much makeup. Nothing too low cut. Nothing too short.
Yes, short skirts.
Nothing. So, you know, iron your stuff. Make sure that it's presentable. Do a check on your clothes the day before as well, because you might have had that.
Make sure you've got no egg sandwich down your shirt.
Make sure
your
it still fits you and that everything, you know, the buttons are all on. So just checking everything over and just being vigilant to make sure that you do go in and give the best first impression.
And, you know, if you are struggling with interview clothes and you're not sure what to wear, or you don't feel like you've got anything suitable, there are some really good charities actually out there that can help with that. So as a side note, you know, if you are struggling, just get in touch. And we maybe be able to talk you through sort of some of the organisations that can help with interview clothes, because there's some really good ones out there. So just a little tip there. So interviews, back to that.
Yep.
So we've got the clothing, we've done the preparation. Oh, in terms of preparation, we need to be looking again at our CV. Yep. We need to be looking again at our application form, and we need to be looking at the job description and the essential criteria. For me, if you look at the essential criteria, you can sometimes second guess what you might be asked. You know, it's not always a foolproof method. But if you're going for, I don't know, a retail job and the essential criteria is customer service experience, it's likely they're going to ask you about that. So when you're preparing, one of the biggest things you need to do is prepare some examples of your past experience.
Yeah. There's always your general standard interview questions. No matter what job you go for, there's about 5 or 6 that you will get asked in some way or another. And obviously, depending on your job, you'll know which ones that are likely to come up. So yeah, with your customer service ones, you're going to be asked things around that. So prepare your answers and prepare some examples. And if you stick to that example and you're confident with it, it means that you're not going to get thrown in the interview process. So they're going to ask you the question, you've already got an answer kind of semi-prepared. It means that you're not in that awkward position where they've asked you a question and you know the answer, but because of the situation, you just, you become a bit stiff and you're not sure what to do. And that in itself makes you more nervous because you're thinking, I don't answer it, I'm not answering it. So have that answer prepared and it will definitely kind of help. And might need to tweak it a bit depending on how they've asked it. And don't be scared to ask them to repeat a question. If you've not heard it properly or you're not showing what they're asking from it, ask them to repeat the question again, rather than just kind of going down the route of answering something that's maybe not necessarily right. Yeah. If you are going off on a tangent, just stop yourself. I mean, just say, actually, I'll stop and start that again. Don't be too nervous by doing that.
And it's also remembering as well that this is what you know. The reason you're sitting in that chair having that interview is because you've applied for this job and the employer likes what they see. The experience that you've got, they like what they see. So this, the answers. And it's probably, if you are struggling, like you said, it's probably just the nerves getting in the way. So that preparation of answers is really key. One of the techniques, I don't know if you've used it before, Felicia, but is called STAR technique. And that's how to build an example answer to an example question. We're finding what we call competency-based questioning happens quite a lot these days, more and more, because employers they don't just want to hear that you can do something, they want examples of when you've done it before so they can match up your experience. So the STAR technique's really good. And what we'll do at the end when we do the practical demonstration is we will share that with you. We'll share that technique so you can get some tips on how to use that. So
as well as preparing answers to questions that you think that you might get asked, it could be good sometimes to prepare questions to ask. I always think that it's good at the end of an interview to ask questions.
Definitely.
It shows that you've been engaged in the interview process and actually you're aware of the position if you have something to ask. So maybe just have a few questions prepped to ask at the end. And if they've answered it throughout the interview, then obviously don't ask it again, but you could, say along the lines of, I did have some questions to ask, but you've actually answered them through the process of the interview anyway. So it just shows that you've kind of been thinking about things.
Now, this is the bit where people really struggle, isn't it? Because it gets to the end of the interview and they're so relieved to get to the end of the interview that they go, no,
that's it.
No, I don't have any questions, when they might have actually prepared some. So that's the moment as well when somebody's mind might go blank. So what I always say to people is, if you find yourself in that position, just remember training and development.
Yeah.
Just stick to that. It's a safe area. Because you're not asking, well, how much holiday am I getting? How much time off am I going to get? How much money are you going to pay me? You're not in it for the money. You're not in it for that, So what you want to get across to the employer is that you are committed to that role. You're going to be loyal to them and you're there for the duration. So you're asking them, what kind of training and development do you offer as an organisation? That's twofold. Shows you're interested in learning, but it also shows the employer that you're there. You're in it for the long run. You're committed to that job.
Yeah.
So that's what I would give as a tip for that one anyway.
Yeah, and back to what you mentioned about salary and holidays. So it's not just that there's better things to ask. Those are ones that just shouldn't be asked at all. There's plenty of opportunity to get to salary, holidays and everything else once you've been offered a position. And generally, if you've got as far as the interview process, you should have an awareness of what salary bracket you're going for and everything else. So to focus on that shows that you're not so much focused on the job itself and other things.
I think what's also one of the things, if I can just go back to the beginning of the interview as well, is, when I was saying your interview starts as soon as you enter the premises. So not just the building, but the premises, as soon as you walk through that gate into that car park, into that reception. So be nice to the receptionist. Don't be slouching in the reception area while you're waiting. Show an interest maybe. Chat to the receptionist, because that receptionist is eyes and ears for that company, trust me. As soon as you walk out that door, they'll be having a conversation with the recruiting manager about what their feelings were about that person as well. So, your interview starts as soon as you enter their premises.
Yeah. And even if an interview is going really well, which is perfect, it's going well, you're feeling really relaxed, don't ever drop your guard, because you are always being assessed in the interview. So don't become too comfortable, maintain your good posture. Don't slip in any kind of language that shouldn't be in there. So it's just always to keep on guard, because I think sometimes if you get a sense that it's going well, people sometimes can relax a bit too much. Mm-hmm. And I think that's not a good thing either.
Yeah, it can come across as sort of a bit cocky, can't it? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Gosh, no wonder interviews are hard. Yeah. It's a lot to remember. Should we do a bit of an example, Felicia, of a question and answer?
Yes, okay. I will be the interviewer. You can be the interviewee.
You're getting the easy part.
Yep. As I like it.
Okay, so let's have a think.
So I'll give you a question, like we've talked a lot about retail and customer service. So again, when we talked about, there will be, if you're going for a certain area of job, there's likely to be certain questions that you're going to get. And I think within a retail customer service role, one of those is likely to be, tell me a time when you've provided a customer service that's gone above and beyond expectations.
Okay.
So do you want to answer that for me using the STAR method?
I would love to, Felicia.
And did we mention what STAR was?
Yes. So we're going to share STAR afterwards.
Yeah.
But just I'll share sort of what it means now. So STAR stands for scenario. So you're setting out your scenario, your task, and this is the task that you had to do, not you had to do. The action that you took as part of that task, and then the result of that task. Now, it sounds complicated, but when I give the example to Felicia, it'll hopefully sort of come together for you. Okay, so customer service. So in my last role, I worked in quite a large toy shop, and a lady came in one day and she was really upset because she couldn't find this particular toy for her son for Christmas. And it was coming quite close to Christmas at that point. She was nearing in tears, bless her. And I really wanted to help her, but we didn't have the toy in stock ourselves. So I just put a bit of time aside, and I said, right, what I'll do is I'll ring all the local stores, see if they've got it, see if we can get it delivered for you. But they didn't, which at this point the lady was sort of really upset. So I thought, right, how can I help this lady? So I phoned a store down south, which is quite far away, but it was one of our main flagship stores. So I thought, if anybody's going to have it in stock, it'll be them. And they did, which was great. So I'd arranged for this toy to be sent overnight delivery, because that's how the deliveries worked within the company. So we could have the toy in our store by the next morning. And it was just really nice because I managed to arrange that just by giving her the time, and she was absolutely delighted. It was just really nice to be able to do that for somebody and just see the result, that she was just, she'd come into the store really upset, really worried that she'd not be able to get her son this toy for Christmas, and she left feeling really, really happy. And, being part of that, I felt was just, gave me job satisfaction, to be honest. I used this technique to build my answer. So by using this technique, you are answering what we call example questions, and you're giving enough information to that employer for them to be able to score you highly on that particular question. And that's what we're looking for. So when you're asked to give an example of a certain trait that you might have, or some experience that you might have, using this technique will help you practice your answering. So it's STAR, which is easy to remember, and that stands for situation, task, action, and result. So as it says here, basically you're starting with explaining the situation and setting the context. So if you remember, I was talking about how a lady had come into the shop and it was nearing Christmas and she couldn't find the toy that she wanted for her son. So it was my task then to try and help this lady to fulfill what she needed, basically. So that was my role, and to give her that excellent customer service. And if you remember, what I did for the action was I explained to the customer that we didn't have it in stock, but I went above and beyond because I phoned some of the other stores to see if they had it and looked at our online store to see if we could get it delivered in. As a result of my action, that lady did actually manage to source that toy for her son and left the store really, really happy with the service that she'd been provided. So that was the example that we used as excellent customer service using this technique. So although it may look quite daunting when you see it like this, when you actually break it down to things you have done before, all you're doing is just filling in the detail for the employer and giving them enough information to prove that you have experience of that particular trait that they're asking for.
So we're going to talk a little bit about body language because, it's one of them that you think is quite an easy one, but there's so many aspects to it to consider, and then you've got everything else to consider as well. So just a few little tricks to hopefully help. Now, you just mentioned to me about the triangle,
yes,
which I think is very new to me, and I'm definitely going to share that in any employability sessions that I do moving on with interviews. When I talk about eye contact within an interview, I always say you do need to maintain good eye contact because it shows a level of confidence. If you're not looking at that employer, it maybe appears that you're not as confident and feel that they're less likely to have confidence in you and your ability if you're not putting that across to them. So with your general eye contact, I'd say maintain a good eye contact, but you want to kind of every 5 seconds or so, you need to break it slightly. So whether it's just to look away to the side, to the floor, and then back to it. So you don't want to kind of have a gaze that holds too long because it can become uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's using your technique, which I think is fab.
Yeah, so the triangle. So if you really struggle with eye contact, which it can be really uncomfortable for some people, and I totally get that. So there's a triangle in between. You have a triangle between your eyebrows, just here. So it's right in the middle of your eyebrows, if you like. If you look at that point on the other person, to them, it's like you're making eye contact. It doesn't look any different. So I'm doing that to you now. Does it look different?
No.
So and it's more comfortable for me because I'm not looking you directly in the eyes, So that's a really good way of maintaining eye contact without actually maintaining eye contact, particularly if you feel really uncomfortable with it, which some people can be. The other thing is posture, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you go in. So when you go in, sit down like this, with your arms crossed, no, that's a big no-no. I think most people know that, don't they? One of the good tips, actually, I find, is if you're sitting on a chair like this, is if you sit your bottom right at the base of the chair, the back of the chair, in the gap, and then you can't slouch. So if you have a tendency to slouch as you're going along, sit your bum right back in the chair, and then you can. Cross your legs, and you will maintain a good back posture then.
That's a good tip. Mm. And also, if you're a fidgeter, it's getting something to get. I don't know if you noticed that I'm a little bit of a fidgeter with my hands normally. So what I've done is just place them on my knee here today, so then I'm not flying all over the place in the air. Because sometimes people, when they are fidgeting, they may end up tapping or something like that, which actually can become quite annoying. You don't hear it yourself when you're doing it, but the person that's interviewing you'll clock onto it pretty quickly, and that can come distracting. Mm-hmm. So that's one of my tips.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it's wearing comfortable clothing when it comes to body language as well, because you don't want to be, sitting there sort of feeling really uncomfortable. I know naturally sort of you might be wearing clothing that you wouldn't be lolling about the house in, but at the same time, don't overdo things too much and restrict yourself too much that you feel you're thinking more about that than you are actually what you're saying. So, Felicia, formats of interviews, because they can come in many different forms, can't they?
They can, I think. back in the day, it was you were going for an interview and you knew what you were going for. It'd be you and the interviewer, and that was it. So as time's gone on, they've just thrown more and more different formats in there. So it's to be aware that you might be going and it would be standard one-to-one interview, or your panel interview, which can be you and up to, I don't know, as many interviewers as possible. So
usually
you can have
around three,
yeah. You can have 1 to 2, 1 to 5. I have had one person that did have 7, which is quite daunting. But definitely when you are going for a panel interview, it's to be aware that they'll all ask you questions. They'll have a different role within the interview. So you might have someone from HR, someone that's a department head leader. It could be someone that's a company leader there, and they will all be looking for different things and ask you different questions related possibly to their role. So it's maintaining eye contact with everybody throughout, when they're asking you questions. Maybe start by directing it to the person that's asked you the question, but making eye contact with everyone as you're answering the question. Another one, your assessment centres, or termed others by other people.
Yeah, these are new and trendy, aren't they? Well, they're not so new.
They're getting more popular.
Yeah, they are. So these are your group sessions, aren't they? Where they might get you to do a team building exercise, and I know that a large supermarket uses these as standard. And the format is that you are invited to your interview with many other people, and then you all go in as a group, and you get given a team. You get split into groups, and you get given a team building exercise. So it could be one of those, where you've got to build a bridge out of newspaper. Yeah, there'll be something to do with balloons, I'm sure, in there. And what's quite daunting about this is obviously you're thrown in the mix with strangers to do this, but also around the room there's employees for that particular supermarket, say, and they are taking notes on you. So each employee is being allocated an interviewee, and they have to take notes based on you, so that you're being watched the whole time. So that's quite a daunting process, that one, for some people anyway. Some people really thrive in it, but I think it's worth finding out if that's what's going to be part of the process, so you can prepare for it and feel as little nerves as possible with that one. And then one of the almost newer ones I've come across is the audition. And this is usually for a lot of hospitality, like trendy bars and restaurants and things might use this, but they'll ask you to do like a talent, like an X Factor type thing for a couple of minutes, which is probably my worst nightmare, to be honest. But yeah, they exist as well. So I think it's really worth, isn't it, just checking in advance what kind of interview to expect, so you can prepare for that as well.
Yeah, I think definitely the assessment centres must be quite daunting, because you're going in there and you can see all your competition. So there could be up to 30 or more people. For those larger companies that use it, it is a way of narrowing down a big pool of people. My thing would be that no matter what the task is, you try and get involved. If they're asking you to stand up and give a presentation on something, it's not about how good you do the presentation. It's more based on, does that person have the willingness to get up and give it a try, rather than just maybe being uncomfortable and saying that you're not doing. So whatever they're asking, give it a try. Don't always feel that they're looking for someone to be the leader. If they've set a task with a group, they're not always looking for someone to take lead. They're actually maybe looking more how you communicate with the rest of the people within your group, how you take on other people's ideas. If you're giving instructions, do you give them clearly? So don't always kind of have a notion of this is what they're wanting for me, and trying to go ahead and showing something that they might not necessarily be looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good point. Mm-hmm. One of the other formats that I've come across as well is, and this is particularly if you're going to be working for an organisation that might offer support work and things like that, is where they get the service users to come in and interview you. So, for example, it might be a day centre for people with disabilities. And so they'll ask the participants of that centre to actually come and interview you, so that they can feed back on whether they like you or not as well. So there's lots of different ways. So it's really important, I think, to find that out beforehand if you can.
Yeah, and you might even get given a role play, which would probably be a nightmare for me to do. But again, with the role play, it's just about getting stuck in, getting involved, not necessarily what you say, but definitely if it's how you may deal with a service user, then they are going to look at how you approach a situation. But I think the key thing is don't not do it. Give it a try with anything.
So Felicia, let's talk a little bit about this new digital world that we are now in with the pandemic and how that relates to interviews, because a lot of interviews now are happening on some of the video platforms that we know and love. And so I suppose we should talk about some hints and tips on how to get that right, really, as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of interviews now, a lot of people that I've been speaking with, a lot of their interviews that have been coming through have been using those platforms rather than actually physically going out to the interview. So lots of things to think about. I think definitely making sure that you've got a comfortable spot to do your interview, making sure that you know the time and that you're prepared for that time, that you've got your backgrounds all set up, there's nothing inappropriate around you for people to see. If you live in a household with a few people, then obviously just making them aware that you do have an interview and that you need it to be quiet. Anything else on there? Obviously, I would say as well, making sure that it is still an interview, so the same rules apply for your digital interview as your normal interview. Yes. So you would dress appropriately.
Don't do it in your pyjamas.
Not in your pyjamas. And definitely maybe dress the bottom half as well, because you may have to stand up at some point. But I think if you are fully dressed as if you are going for an interview, then you will feel more kind of professional and prepared. And I think that will help you approach your questions in that way.
I think one of the things as well with those video platforms is that you can actually, before you hook into the interview, you can check what your background looks like before you do so. So set up your background and then just have a look on the screen and just double check that you have moved things out of the way and that you are happy with what that background looks like. Some platforms do allow you to put like a bit of a sort of filtered background on as well, don't they? In a blurred background. So you could consider that. Although I don't like them too much because they can blur you round a bit on the edges as well, can't they? So if you've done your hair for your interview, you might not get the full effect. So there is that to look at as well.
I think if you're not happy with where you are in your background and you feel uncomfortable with it, then there are the background settings. So there are ones that look a bit like an office or, make your living room look really fancy. And yes, they do distort how you look if you move. But if you keep straight, then it's not a big problem. But if you are really uncomfortable with where you are and you don't want people to see, then maybe use one of the preset backgrounds that are in there.
Yeah, make sure that your laptop that you're using or the device that you're using is fully charged and that you've got a charger nearby ready to plug in just in case. What else? I suppose make sure that your mobile phone is switched off just as it would be in a normal interview. Either switched off or at least on silent. Also not on vibrate, remember, because vibrate makes a lot of noise too. So there's that to consider. And then I suppose just making sure like things like distractions are out of the way if you are being interviewed from home on a video platform. So that's things like pets, children, husbands.
The washing machine.
Yeah. So all those things that we might not think about in a normal interview, we all of a sudden have to think about on a video call. But I think you're absolutely right, Felicia, about dressing up for it just as much as you would a normal interview. Those first impressions still really count. With video calling, and I don't know about you, but I get really distracted by seeing myself, on the screen, where sort of they have that mirror thing going on. So if you are distracted by that and you can't stop looking at yourself for whatever reason, you can have a setting where that goes away and all you can see is the person. So as if you are, just talking to that person, you can't see that little square in the corner of yourself talking as well, because that can be really distracting. And, with interviews, you need to really focus. So
I think what we mentioned about the eye contact as well, if you are looking down in that little screen at yourself, then to the person interviewing you, you're not looking at them. And another tip is that if you're looking at the actual computer screen, then the eye contact's not the same as if you're looking at the interview. You actually need to look in the little light, light camera, and that's where you get the most kind of direct eye contact to the interviewer. So it's quite difficult sometimes looking at that camera because you feel like you're not looking at the person. By looking at the person, you're actually not having the same level of eye contact. So,
but it does help actually. For people who feel uncomfortable with eye contact because you're not looking at that person directly. You're not looking at them
directly, but however, to them, you were looking at them directly.
Yeah.
Because you are at home and the interviewer can't see everything that's going on around you, you're in a good position actually to have a few little notes perfectly placed. So if you can have things stuck at the side of your laptop and stuff that if you do feel like uncomfortable with maybe answering some things, you can have little prompts around the place. I definitely wouldn't go for shuffling paper because that can be really loud around the computer, but you can, and I have stuck little notes around that don't block the camera, and it might just help you when you maybe answer something that you think would normally trip you up a little bit.
No, that's a really good point. I didn't think of that actually.
Oh, I've had shoe boxes with things pinned to shoe boxes because then they're kind of, and all it is a sideward glance and you have something written in bold, but it just reminds you of something that you might want to mention or your questions that you want to ask at the end. They can be written down that side. So that's also a little tip.
Brilliant. I suppose one of the other digital forms is telephone, isn't it? So you can, more these days as well, you can have a telephone assessment. And that's a whole different kettle of fish altogether. You've got to articulate the communication side, your listening skills have to be really key with that as well because you haven't got any of that body language to contend with.
Yeah, definitely with your telephone interview, then you do have to make sure that definitely the distractions in the background are not there because they're not even being able to see you as with some of the other digital platforms. So it really has to be a clear background, making sure that you're in a quiet place. Again, making sure that you've got your answers prepped as with any other interview. I mean, a telephone interview is no less than if you were going in to see somebody face to face. You still expect the same level of competency when you answer your questions. So it's making sure that you're prepared and that you do speak clearly. And some people just naturally speak quite low or they speak quite fast. So maybe good to practice sometimes if you're not confident how you come across on the phone. Practice with somebody. A friend or a family member and get them to give you some feedback in terms of, how you sound on the phone, which could be good.
And I suppose it's remembering to just sit in one place, because when I'm on the phone to my mum, on the house phone, and I can be wandering around the house doing things, when I'm chatting, and that's fine. But when you're in an interview situation, it's remembering that, that is a professional situation still, even though it's on the phone. So just sit in one place so that you've no distractions and you're not tempted to start pottering around the house while you're on the phone to somebody.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So you've had the invite to interview. First thing I think you should do is research the company. What do you think, Felicia?
Yeah, company, even if it's a company that you feel that you know a lot about because you shop there, I think you still have to do that little bit of extra background and go on the company website. Most companies will have a website and on there will be a section that says about us. So you can read and just look at maybe, what it says about the team, the services they provide. You can get a lot about the company's values from there. And sometimes that really helps because one of the interview questions that you might be asked and does get asked a lot is tell me what you know about the company.
Yeah.
And I think it takes no more than 5 minutes to go on and do a little bit of research on the company. And if you've not done that basic minimum, it doesn't put you in the best standing if you can't tell them a little bit about the company.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you say, you could be going to a really well-known brand and you could sort of say, well, you sell this and that. But if you've gone onto that website, as you say, Felicia, and you've looked at the history, for example, and, you just go in, it could be just a little snippet or, and you could even say, I've had a look on your website and I noticed, I was really interested to see that, your history, because I never knew that about you and it's made it more interesting to me kind of thing. You can actually say that you've researched the company because what it's saying to that employer is that you care and that you're interested in them, and it's not just a job, you know.
I think people do ask sometimes, well, when I'm looking at the company, what is it that I need to pull out of that? And it is the basics that, other than what are the services that they provide? What's the staff like? Is it, do they have maybe 3,000 and you only thought that it was a smaller team? You can say, I didn't realise the company was so large. Didn't realise that you operated in these locations. So it's looking at the locations, the services, what the staff's like. It could be something within the benefits in terms of staff development that they have on there that you didn't know about, or different sections of the company that might have opportunities for you to develop into later down the line. And again, that shows that you're thinking about your long-term career with the company and other areas that you might be able to work in that could benefit the company as well. So definitely not spending too much time, not looking, to research War and Peace, just a little bit that shows that you care enough about the job to do a little bit of extra background work.
Yeah, and that you have done that research when you go.